2007, 3 years after receiving my doctorate, I was professionally lost, unsure and actually afraid of what I really wanted. I was in a job that was going nowhere. There was no next level position. I wasn't working on my licensing exam to become a psychologist. I wasn't trying to start a practice. I was in a job that had little to do with psychology, and I was working hard. I was working really hard, but not for myself. It's what I knew how to do, no matter what, and it was bad.
Most days, Lisa would come home and tell me about the next demoralizing incident. Her boss was aggressively dismissing her and putting her down in meetings. He would publicly chastise her. It was getting progressively toxic.
Even with a doctorate from an Ivy League university, with every questioning that he gave me, with every negative engagement, I would question myself. Did I give that plan enough detail? Did I even know what I was talking about here? Even if I felt angry, I felt like I had no reason to say anything. I would find myself late on a Thursday night in the copy room, wondering to myself, what am I doing here? I hate it here. I just couldn't move. I was paralyzed.
Each week, I would see Lisa in so much pain and anguish, and I try to comfort and support her. I tell her how smart and talented she was, and that she didn't need to stay at this job. But she wasn't ready to hear me. She was determined to stay and work that much harder.
When I discovered that my counterpart was making 50% more than me, it hit me like a ton of bricks. Not only was I devaluing myself, but my boss was blatantly devaluing me. And so, for the first time, I decided to stand up for myself and demand pay equity. To which, at first, he responded in a careless, dismissive way that there were many other people that needed a raise before I got one. But in the end, he relented and said I would get an increase in 2 weeks. He started to praise me and give me positive feedback, and it made the environment a little bit more tolerable. But then 4 weeks went by and nothing, no increase. And I receded back into my powerlessness and felt like there was nothing I could do about it.
Months went by with Lisa being unable to make a move. Each day, she'd come home more and more exhausted and beaten down. She hated her job, but couldn't summon up the energy to find another job. She felt trapped, and I felt powerless to help her. All my words of encouragement and support could not move her. Here she was, a smart, talented, hardworking woman who was floundering. So I asked her, what would it take to get you to leave?
And I didn't have an answer. I just felt stuck. I couldn't make a plan to move forward. I couldn't figure out what to do next. All I knew how to do was work harder at my job.
So I said to her, something so obvious, but she couldn't see it. If you work as hard for yourself as you do for others, you will be unstoppable.
And in that moment, those words didn't change anything. But I knew that they were right. And I knew if I would only be able to fully take them in, I could make something happen. And then I walked into the moment that would change everything. I was in a senior staff meeting of all women, except for my boss. And one of the women asked, "What's that music that's playing in the background?" And my boss responded, "It's music to soothe the savage breast." And in that one moment, the beast inside of me that could no longer be lulled was awakened. And it was clear to me that I was powerful, and that that strength inside of me would no longer be tamed by him or anyone else. I walked into my office, I closed the door, I called Richard, I told him what had happened, and said, "I'm quitting."
And I said, quit, it's way past time.
And so that weekend, I borrowed my mom's car, I packed up my office, and on Monday morning, I walked into his office with just my keys and a letter of resignation in hand. No warning, no notice, no nothing. And at first, he cried, and he begged and he pleaded with me to stay because my salary was encumbered, which in grant terms means he couldn't spend it on anything else. And then when he realized that I wasn't budging, he became enraged, and he yelled and he screamed at me, and he told me, "You'll never work in education again." And as I was leaving his office, I could hear my footsteps echoing, and I felt both free and terrified simultaneously. I don't remember the train ride home. The next thing I remember, I was pacing in circles in my living room, having a panic attack. As I called friends and family and recounted what happened, it was the first time in my life that I was without a job. And I was terrified. I heard his words ringing in my ears, "You'll never work in education again."
Lisa was filled with fear and uncertainty, but I reassured her that everything would be fine.
And I asked him, "How will I spend my days? How will I fill them?"
So I encouraged her to start studying for her licensing exam and to begin to explore the process of starting a private practice for the two of us, which was a big dream of mine.
And had been a dream of mine, but I let fear and doubt crush it out of me. And so I let Richard's words ground me. If I only work as hard for myself as I do for others, I will be unstoppable. So in 2 weeks, I had a part-time job in education, making more than that full-time job did. And I started to craft a plan to study for my licensing exam and began the administrative aspects of starting a practice. By the end of that summer, I had passed my licensing exam with flying colors, and the practice was ready to go. And for over 10 years, we've been in practice, getting to free people every day that were just stuck just like I was. It's a dream. I didn't know it then, but I know it now, that I was in the grips of imposter syndrome.
Imposter syndrome is a phenomenon in which people find it difficult to internalize their accomplishments, skills, and experience, are constantly in fear of being exposed as a fraud, attribute their successes to luck or a key relationship, and overwork to compensate for their perceived lack of ability. The paradox is that people with imposter syndrome are not frauds. They're actually high achievers who are extremely competent and are able to really excel.
So for me, I had a hard time feeling like I deserved my PhD. For years after I received it, I would get those annoying fundraising calls from my university, and I would listen really carefully to the voicemail to make sure it wasn't somebody calling to say that they had found a mistake in my dissertation and were going to revoke my PhD. So actually, when I was prepping for this talk, I realized that I wasn't the only one having that thought. There were over 158 million sort of results to that question. As a result of that fear, I was always just happy to have a job and worked really hard to keep it. I never asked myself what I really wanted. I never gave myself a ton of options. I never let myself see the strength of the relationships that I had built around me. I never let myself take in the years of experience, the training, the degrees. I acted as if it all never existed. And that they were just doing me a favor. Every mistake I made felt like a declaration of my true incompetence. Every presentation, every training, every event felt like I was going to blow it. And when I didn't and I succeeded, the praise was gone as quickly as it had come. I was in the imposter cycle. Have a high-stakes project, overwork, get positive feedback, don't internalize it, and then enter into the cycle all over again. There's another imposter cycle. We call it imposter cycle 2. You get a high-stakes project, you procrastinate due to the anxiety about the project, then you get mixed or positive feedback, and then you interpret any negative evaluation, yours or others, to your incompetence, and then you engage the cycle again.
When imposter syndrome is typically discussed or researched, it typically focuses on the individual experiencing it. What are the key early events that created the fertile ground for it? What are the particular thoughts and behaviors linked to it, which are all very important. But in the course of our work, one of the things that we realize are that the overlooked components that sustain imposter syndrome are the workplace cultures and managers that perpetuate it. There are several elements in the zeitgeist of the modern work culture that can be triggering for people with imposter syndrome. First, when your performance objectives and goals are constantly shifting, you don't have the comfort that you're hitting your targets, which leaves you feeling that you constantly have to prove yourself, which can be very triggering for people with imposter syndrome. Another triggering component is a manager who withholds praise, who rarely provides positive feedback due to the belief that few deserve it. So chasing that praise becomes the focus of your work. So we've all been there. You finish a key project, you're on a high, you go speak to your manager to get some words of encouragement or support, and where thank you or good job should be in a sentence, you instead hear,
I noticed there were some significant errors in that project. You're going to have to remedy them for the next time.
Which leaves you feeling dejected and believing you have to work that much harder to get some praise.
Workplace cultures that significantly punish mistakes and expect perfection are rife for imposter syndrome because they leave you feeling like you'll never be good enough and that overworking is the only way to feel like you even belong.
Organizations that support stars and scapegoats with little room for growth or opportunities to change people's perceptions, where even the stars feel insecure because they know their status is tenuous, especially if they make a visible error.
Workplace cultures in which there are no boundaries between your personal and professional life, in which you're expected to be on call 24 hours a day, where you are also have no privacy at work and overworking is rewarded, can sustain imposter feelings. Because when you have imposter syndrome, you find it difficult to set boundaries, to care for yourself and make yourself a priority.
These imposter triggering dynamics in the work environments are not accidental. They often drive unhealthy levels of productivity in their employees and do not care about the impact and destruction it causes the people in their organizations. They're solely focused on their bottom line.
And if you have imposter syndrome, you should have a bottom line too. And the asset you should be valuing is you. And in valuing yourself, you should be a better manager and set attainable goals that make your dreams your priority.
Set boundaries to value your self-care and your personal life. Teach your inner critic to be your inner cheerleader, to be proud of yourself when you do your best, even if you make a mistake. Accept and trust support from those who truly care about you.
And unleash the beast inside of yourself and let it work for you. Because when you work as hard for yourself as you do for others, you're going to be unstoppable.